Amazing what a little democracy will do. On Friday night, we brought you the utterly hair-raising, blood-boiling, horrifying story of Flint, Michigan, where the drinking water got poisoned with lead starting last year, when the Rick Snyder administration allowed that town to switch from getting its water pumped up from Detroit to instead drawing it directly from the Flint River. It was cheaper. There's nothing inherently wrong with getting your drinking water from a river. Lots of places do it. But the chemistry of river water makes it a more corrosive kind of water. So you have to give the water special anti-corrosion treatment before you send it coursing through the pipes and into the homes of your town. If you fail to do that, that more corrosive river water eats through your pipes and the lead solder that's used to hold your pipes together, and the people of your town get lead poisoning. So on Friday, we talked to a heroic pediatrician in Flint, Michigan, who, with no funding and no staff, just of her own volition, ran the first study showing that kids in Flint, Michigan were 2 and 3 times as likely to show elevated levels of lead in their blood after the state of Michigan inexplicably allowed the town to make this switch in their water without making it safe first. Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha told us that lead is as bad as any neurotoxin on Earth, and that every kid in Flint who drank that water or who ate food cooked with that water is at risk, lifelong risk of some level of damage that may already be done and, again, cannot be turned back. The formal write-up of those results in the American Journal of Public Health was just published today. There's no safe amount of lead that you can be exposed to. And if you get too much exposure, the results, particularly for kids, are not just irreversible, they're awful. It's rashes and skin lesions. It's also lost IQ points and emotional problems and behavioral problems. So the very poor town of Flint, Michigan, now has 2 huge challenges. First, can they intervene fast enough and fully enough in the lives of these kids who were poisoned by this policy decision? Can they intervene early and fully enough to mitigate the physical harm that has been done to those kids' brains because of what the Snyder administration did to them? First. Second, can Flint undo the harm to its infrastructure caused by all that unchecked corrosion in all the water pipes all over the city and in every single inhabited residence and every school and every public building and every private building, everything and anything plumbed to have running water in the whole city now needs to be looked at, if not fixed, because of what they put through those pipes. So, number 1, save the kids. Number 2, save the city. Both have been seriously harmed. The reason this is a government problem, a Governor Rick Snyder problem specifically, is because under him, the state knew that lead levels were rising rapidly in Flint's water months before they took any action. They could see it in test results from Flint's water heading into the summer. They could see it even earlier, in February, in alarmed letters from the federal EPA to the state of Michigan. This is a message from the EPA to 2 different officials in Rick Snyder's environmental agency. They're dated last February, February 26, 2015. This is a little less than a year after Flint had switched over its water. The EPA writes, quote, "The main purpose of my email is to alert you to the high lead levels reported to a citizen yesterday by the Flint Water Department." The EPA says, quote, "This goes back to what you and I were talking about yesterday, that the different chemistry water is leaching out contaminants." So Rick Snyder's government got that news from the federal EPA in February, and they did not say a word about it to the public for the better part of a year. We knew that as of Friday. Now there's something new. The MacArthur Genius Award-winning drinking water expert from Virginia Tech, who dropped everything when he heard what was going on in Flint, and he drove 15 hours straight to start testing the water in Flint, that Virginia Tech professor now says that in addition to ignoring the EPA telling them what was wrong, the state of Michigan under Rick Snyder also intentionally withheld even its own data. The Snyder administration's own data, which showed the levels of lead in blood tests in Flint going up. The professor has now posted new documents that were obtained from the state through the Freedom of Information Act request. Those documents include this one from a Michigan state health worker who wrote to her colleagues in July, quote, "There does appear to be a higher proportion of elevated blood levels last summer compared to usual." And again in September from another health worker. "Sounds like there might be more to this than we learned previously." Yikes. Literally, that word is in the FOIA document. Yikes. So that was what was going on inside the halls of Governor Snyder's administration internally while the town of Flint was being poisoned and while the governor and his administration's public face was that everything was fine. Back in March, as they were coming up on a year since they made the switch in Flint's water, when Flint water was already showing signs of being seriously dangerous and protests over the water had already started, even though people didn't yet know how bad the problem was. In March, this past March 2015, the neutered little Flint City Council, one of the vestigial reminders of elected representative government in the town of Flint since Governor Snyder took away their local control, the neutered City Council voted 7-1 this past March that the city should undo the water switch. They should go back to their old, safe, clean water. But the city council was just window dressing at that point. They were just a reminder of what democracy used to be. Because the real person in charge of Flint by then was the emergency manager appointed by Governor Rick Snyder to run the town instead of its elected officials. And when they took that vote to go back to their clean water source, the emergency manager called that decision, that vote, quote, incomprehensible. He said, quote, it is incomprehensible to me that 7 members of the Flint City Council would want to send more than $12 million a year to the system serving Southeast Michigan. Even if Flint ratepayers could afford it, water from Detroit is no safer than water from Flint. Wrong. Wrong a billion times over. But of course, he was the emergency manager. He got to decide what Flint did, not the Just for Show City Council. And yeah, so they may have voted to switch back and save the kids of Flint, but that was dead on arrival with Rick Snyder's emergency manager who kiboshed the whole thing. In this disaster, counting that guy, and you count the guy who signed the order to switch the water and signed the assurance that the water from the new source would be safe. All in all, we have tracked 3 emergency managers who had a role in this mess, all of whom replaced locally elected officials and all of whom reported just to Governor Rick Snyder. Plus, there's the State Environmental Agency, which reports to Governor Snyder. Plus, we have the State Health Agency, which found evidence of elevated lead levels in Flint human beings over the summer, while the state publicly maintained that everything was fine, everything was safe, and anybody telling you otherwise was a kook or a crank. The boss of all of them, the one they all reported to, is Rick Snyder, governor of Michigan. The new mayor of Flint just decided to test to see what powers she might still have in Michigan. She decided to declare a state of man-made disaster, state of man-made emergency in Flint. That's how she's spending her holidays. Her office tells us they're currently working on a response plan. They say they'll try to get the most help for Flint kids and for the town, and they'll have a better chance of getting that help if Governor Snyder supports their disaster declaration, because that could open the door to federal help. Governor Snyder's office tells us they did send over some representatives from the Michigan State Police to talk to Flint about it. They say they will work closely with Flint now. The governor's office would very much like us to mention the $10 million they've allocated to try to help fix this problem. As for whether Governor Snyder is going to block or support Flint's declaration of a disaster, though, the governor's office would only tell us that so far they have not received it. So that's word today from your governor, Rick Snyder, Michigan. We will see what help you get. And this is a Michigan disaster, but honestly, it's starting to feel like it's no longer Flint. It's no longer just Michigan waiting for his answer on this anymore. It's starting to feel like it's the whole country. Watch this space. That does it for us tonight. We'll see you again tomorrow. Now it's time for the last word with Lawrence O'Donnell. Good evening, Lawrence.
Hey, Rachel, I was watching your show tonight, as I always do.
Okay.
But this time, you said something. You used a word that I've never heard you use before. And I can't think of how many times I've heard you use Yiddish before, but this one was really, really striking.
Schlemazel?
I am going to try in the next 60 minutes to clean things up around here and not use that word, like just not quote Donald Trump when it comes to that word at all, just not once.
Well, I wish you the best.
I don't know if I can.
You're immense for even trying, I gotta say.
That is my ambition for the hour. See if I can do it.